Well, it was just getting light out in the forest as the morning was coming, and there was a big patch of huge roses. They were this big. And out of a huge red rose climbed a little man. He was about that tall. And he stretched and yawned and was just waking up when all of a sudden his eyes got really wide and he said, "It's Valentine's Day and I forgot a card for Sally." Sally was his girlfriend who lived in a big rose nearby. And he said, "Maybe there's still time to get one from Charlie." And so, as you may know, the stems of rose bushes have very sharp thorns sticking out of them, and for a little guy, they make a perfect ladder. So down the ladder he went, which was the stem of the rose, down to the bottom of the ground, and under a leaf he pulled out his bow and arrows. And he started running along a path beneath the rose bushes. Now, the path was a very, very tiny path. We wouldn't have even noticed a path. But for a little guy, it was just right. And he ran under the patch of roses until he got to an open patch of dirt. Now, it wasn't very far across for us. We could have probably crossed it in 2 steps. But for him, it was a big distance. And so he stopped in the grass and looked around, up in the air, to one side and then to the other side, because there's lots of things out in the forest that might like a tasty morsel for breakfast. Things like a spider, things like a robin, things like a little snake. There might be all kinds of things out in the forest that would like a tasty morsel to eat for breakfast. Well, he didn't see anything. So he ran across fast as he could across the dirt and got into the grass on the other side with his little path. And the grass came up and made a little covering over the path so nobody could see him when he was on the path. And he ran down the path until he got to a little stream. Now, for us, we could have jumped over that stream with one easy jump. But for him, it was like a big river. So he lifted up a leaf at the edge of the river, and underneath was a canoe just his size. So he put his bow and arrows in the bottom of the canoe and got the paddle and pushed the canoe out into the water. Now, he knew he couldn't make it all the way across without resting. So he looked out, and there was a pretty big rock out in the river. And he knew if he could get there, he could rest behind the rock. And then he spotted another rock a little further over, which would give him another place to rest, and then he could make it to the shore. So he pushed off, paddle, 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 and he was halfway to the rock when all of a sudden there was a loud buzzing noise, and he looked up, and there coming at him was a big black wasp coming right across the water, right at him. And the little man ducked down in the bottom of the boat as fast as he could, and the wasp went right over the top of him, missed him, and flew up in the air. But it didn't go away. It circled around up in the air and dove down again and came right for him. But this time, Robert, because that's what his name was, Robert was ready. And he pulled out his bow and arrow, and as the wasp got right on top of him, he shot an arrow right into the wasp's eye. And the wasp blinked his eye, blinked his eye, blinked his eye, and then flew up in the air because that arrow hurt his eye. And he flew up in the air, blinking his eyes, and took off and never came back. Whew. So Robert paddled to the first rock and rested. And then he set out for the second rock. Paddle, 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 paddle. And he almost made it to the second rock when all of a sudden he heard a sound that sounded like, sort of like this. And he knew exactly what that was. And he ducked down in the bottom of the boat, and then he popped right up again because he knew what that sound was. And he looked to one side and he looked to the other side, and off to his right, sitting on a rock, on another rock, he saw what he was looking for, a big frog. And I think you know that frogs have very long tongues. And they shoot their tongues out, and the end of the tongue is very, very sticky. And it catches an insect, a bug or a fly, right on the end of the tongue, and they suck the insect back in and eat it right up. Well, the frog had seen Robert and shot his tongue out, but he missed. But Robert could see his mouth was going. He was getting more air in, and sure enough, he opened his mouth and whah! He stuck out his tongue and it shot out right to Robert, but Robert was ready. And he had in his hand a little knife, and when the frog's tongue got right there, he stuck his knife right in the end of the tongue. And the frog went and stuck his tongue in so hard that it knocked him upside down off the rock and into the water, and he swam away. And Robert put his knife away and paddled to the rock and rested, and then made his way to the shore. Well, on the shore was another path leading through the grass. So he hid his canoe and he started up the path. And he walked for about 15 minutes until he came to a log right by the side of the path. Now, we would have looked at that log and we would have thought it was just a log. But there was a little bit of branch, just a little bit sticking out from one side of the log. Robert walked over to it and pulled on the branch, and a door opened in the log. And he walked into a store inside the log. And there was a counter, and the counter had a glass front, and inside the glass front was all kind of candies and clothes and all kinds of things for sale. And on shelves behind the counter there were more things. And behind the counter stood a little man just about Robert's size, except he had quite a fat belly. And he had a white apron on. And he looked at Robert and said, "Hello, Robert. Happy Val." "Well, you don't look very happy for Valentine's Day." And Robert said, Charles, I have a terrible problem. I forgot a Valentine's Day card for Sally. Do you have any left?" And Charles said, "Oh, no. I sold the last one yesterday." And Charles said, "But I've got an idea, Robert. Maybe we can make a Valentine's Day card for Sally." And Robert said, "You think so?" And Charles said, "Come on, let's go into the back storeroom." So they went into the back storeroom, and Charles found a piece of white construction paper, and he cut out a rectangle which was about as big as Robert was. and he pinned it up on the wall. And then he found a paintbrush and red paint. And on the white construction paper, he painted, "To Sally, from Robert, Happy Valentine's Day," with a big heart at the bottom, all in red paint. And Charlie said, "How does that look?" Robert said, "That is great. It's a huge Valentine's Day card." And Charlie said, "We'll have to let the paint dry. Let's go back out into the shop and we'll have a cup of coffee and a glazed donut." And so they went back out into the shop, and there was a little wood stove with 2 chairs, and they each had a cup of coffee and a very delicious glazed donut. And finally, Charlie said, "Well, let's go check on the card." And they went back into the storeroom, and the paint was all dry. So they folded the card so it was folded in half, and Robert picked it up. It was just as tall as he was. And Charles said, "Do you want me to help you carry it?" And Robert said, "No, I think if I put it up, I can carry it." So out the door he went. He thanked Charles so much for helping him with a Valentine's card. And down the path he went. And he got to his little canoe. And the card just fit in the canoe exactly on edge, front to back. But it made the canoe quite tippy one way and the other. So Robert had to balance very well. Well, he looked at his 2 rocks, and he started out for the first rock. Paddle, 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 paddle. And he got almost to the first rock when there was a noise up in the air above him. And he looked up, and up in the air was a big cloud of mosquitoes. Now, I don't know if you know anything about mosquitoes, but they are the craziest insects in the entire forest. And they were all talking to themselves up in the cloud, the swarm. They were saying, "Well, where do you think we ought to go? I don't think we ought to go upstream. No, we ought to go downstream. No, we ought to go back the way we came. No, we ought to go across the stream. I don't know what we ought to do. What do you think we ought to do? I don't know. What's that down on the water? I don't know what's that down on the water. What do you think that is? I don't think it's anything down on the water. Is there something up in the air? No, there's something down in the water. And it looks like it might have blood. No, no, no. It doesn't have any blood. Yeah, I think it does have blood. I think we ought to go down and see it." And they were all arguing and arguing and arguing. And the swarm of mosquitoes started to get lower and lower in the air. "Well, let's go down and look at it. I think we ought to check it out because it might be good blood in there." Because mosquitoes love to eat and drink blood. Well, Charlie was looking up at them and he said, "Hey, guys." And he said, "I just saw a rabbit on the other side of the stream. And he's got a lot more blood than I do. He could feed all of you with blood. You'd be all filled up." "Rabbit? Rabbit? Did you say there was a rabbit? Where did you say the rabbit was? Rabbit up in the air? No, the rabbit's not in the air. Is the rabbit down in the water? No, the rabbit's not down in the water. Was the rabbit back behind where we came from? No, I don't know where the rabbit is. Is he on the other side of the stream? I don't know. We ought to think. Where do you think we ought to go? Do you think we ought to go upstream or downstream? Where's the rabbit? Where do you think that rabbit could be? Let's go find the rabbit." And they argued and argued and argued. And the whole group of mosquitoes flew away across the stream, still arguing with themselves. Well, Robert made it to his rock, and he rested. And then he started for the second rock. And he made it to the second rock. And he rested. And all he had to do was go a little way further to the shore. And he got halfway to the shore when all of a sudden he heard a voice. "Well, hello, Robert. Happy Valentine's Day." And he looked up in the air, and there was a big yellow, red, blue butterfly. Now you know how butterflies fly. They're not too steady. They fly along, not too steady. And he looked up and he said, "Oh, hello, Samantha. Happy Valentine's Day. Are you heading out into the forest to look for some flowers?" "Oh, yes, I'm heading out into the forest to look for what? What's that in your canoe?" "Oh, no, it's nothing, Samantha. It's nothing. Nothing to worry about. Why don't you just go look for pretty flowers?" "I know I will, but what is that big white thing in your canoe?" "Oh, nothing, Samantha. It's just a card for Sally. It's nothing to worry about." "Oh, a card for Sally. I want to come down and see it." "No, no, Samantha, no, don't come down here, Samantha. You know you don't fly very steadily. No, no, why don't you just stay up in the air, Samantha? Don't come down here don't, no, Samantha, no, no." And Samantha came down lower and lower and lower and lower, flying, and one of her wings hit the card and knocked the card and the canoe upside down in the water. Well, the water wasn't too deep. Robert stood up and he grabbed the canoe and he grabbed the card and he waded all the rest of the way into the shore, dragging the card and dragging the canoe. The card was soaking wet. He dragged the card along the shore, pushed the canoe under a leaf, and dragged the car through the mud and through the dirt down the path. When he got to the open patch of dirt, he didn't even look around. He just dragged the card, which was now getting all muddy and dirty, dragged it along behind him, got to the rose patch, dragged the card under a stem of a big yellow rose and left it on the ground. And he climbed up the thorns to the top of the yellow rose. And he called, "Sally! Sally, are you there?" And a voice from down inside the rose said, "Oh, yes, I'm here, Robert. Is that you? I'll be right up." And in a minute, a very pretty girl, just his size, climbed up out of the rose and said, "Happy Valentine." "What happened to you?" Because he was soaking wet and he was muddy and he didn't look very good at all. And he told her everything that happened when he was trying to get her a card. And she said, "Well, let's go down and see the card." And he said, I don't think we want to do that, Sally." "Oh, yes, we do." And down she went, quick as a wink, down on the thorns, down the ladder to the bottom where the card was lying on the ground. And she called out, Robert, you've got to come down. This card is so heavy, I can't open it." And he came down the thorns. He didn't want to see the card. He felt so bad, but he had to help her open the card because it was so wet it wouldn't open. And so two of them grabbed the edge of the card and they lifted it and opened it out. And in the inside, there was nothing but red. All the paint had run. There were no letters. There was no Valentine. There was no nothing but red all over the inside of the card. And Sally looked at it. And then she looked at Robert. And she said, "That is the best Valentine's Day card I have ever received." And that is the end of the story. Did you like it? Do you think you could write a picture of your favorite part with your crayons? Or do you think you could use some words and write some words about your very favorite part? I think that would be a great idea, don't you?